I mentioned that one of our big prominent funders is the National Institutes of Health, and their interest in this event, National Institute on Drug Abuse, is being able to understand not just their traditional role in public health and medicine, but as this is a complicated crisis, it also intersects with a number of other areas, such as the justice system. So our next speaker is our keynote on behalf of the justice system, coming locally from Orange County. He has a large involvement in the opioid crisis. If you like what he has to say, I'm sure he'd appreciate you voting for him and spreading the word in the coming election. I'd like to welcome our Orange County District Attorney, Tony Rackauckas.
We doctors were wrong in thinking that opioids can't be used long term. They can be and they should be. We used to think they'd stop working, or the patients would become addicts, or they'd be sedated into inactivity. We now find that these medicines are much safer, much more powerful, much more versatile than we used to think, and we feel that they should be used much more liberally for people with all sorts of chronic pain.
Some patients may be afraid of taking opioids because they're perceived as too strong or addictive. But that is far from actual fact. Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
She make the noises. She makes the noises. Yo.
She's breathing. Come on, baby. Yeah, she's trying to. Come on, girl.
Come on, Jay, wake up. Jay, wake up. Look at me. Look at me, Jay. Jay, look at me. Come on.
Good morning. I'm Tony Rackauckas, Orange County District Attorney, and glad to be invited here to talk a little bit about some of our responses in law enforcement, particularly in the DA's office, with respect to this opioid crisis. That clip that you just saw was from an HBO documentary, This Pill May Kill You. And of course, it shows people under the influence of opioids juxtaposed to the advertising that was paid for primarily by Purdue Pharma to advertise the use of opioids and to attempt to convince doctors and other people that it doesn't have the addictive qualities that it actually does have. Generally, the goals of the criminal justice system are to enforce the law, to deter crime and to protect public safety. In the context of this opioid epidemic, we've tried our best in our office to try to approach those goals aggressively and successfully. So we can talk about the front end and the back end, I think, is to make a little bit of sense. So on the front end, we've alleged in our case against Purdue Pharma and other pharmaceutical companies that have increased the supply created by aggressive marketing and drugs for chronic pain conditions. And so with respect to these companies, we've filed an unfair business practices case to try to change the way that drugs are marketed, and also to try to, in my view, to try to require them to spend a good deal more money, or to spend a good deal more money in the treatment of the addiction. So on the back end, what we see, of course, is hundreds of deaths just in our county. And you saw the numbers a little bit ago, national numbers, but in our county we have hundreds of overdose deaths annually, and there's a proliferation of people driving under the influence of opioids, and now, in addition to that, we're seeing a lot of fraud in the addiction treatment area, where people are coming there to seek help, and some of these treatment programs are just helping very little or not at all, but aggressively billing insurance companies to get a lot of money. So we were one of the first, but now there are over 1,500 jurisdictions nationwide to file this case against the manufacturers of opioids, and so that process is growing exponentially. In fact, it's to be honest with you, it's kind of complicating our prosecution of our case because there's so many plaintiffs. But we have a trial set in June, and so our expectation is to bring Purdue Pharma and a number of these other 4 other pharmaceutical companies to trial. Our complaint alleges that the origins of the epidemic relate to increases in the availability of the drugs and changes in the way that the drugs were prescribed. And that's the front part of our strategy, sort of preemptive, trying to combat and reduce the supply. The more traditional prosecution that we're involved in to try to combat the crime after the fact is a couple of things. Well, one is the driving under the influence of drugs, and so we've done quite a bit of work now to aggressively go after driving under the influence of drugs. And in that regard, we've gotten some grants. We've developed expertise in our ability to prosecute those cases, and we're teaching other district attorneys' offices in this state and in other states about the procedures for developing the evidence and prosecuting those cases. We've also I've started an addiction recovery task force to combat the crime that so many vulnerable people who are addicted are trying to get help, and basically they and the insurance companies are being defrauded. So our prosecution efforts in the drug driving are, I mentioned those already. I mean, it's a big issue, is driving under the influence of drugs, and we're prosecuting that on a daily basis. And we've trained prosecutors to specialize in that, or to at least spend much of their specialty in that. And we have them in the branch courts. On a homicide unit, we have a prosecutor in the homicide unit specifically for driving under the influence of drugs, because it causes so many deaths. In 2010, a nationwide study of deadly crashes found that about 47% of drivers who tested positive for drugs had used a prescription drug, most commonly prescription painkillers. Trying to move through this a little bit faster because I know we're behind. So another area that I mentioned quickly was with respect to problems relating to fraud associated with the addiction treatment centers. So the demand for treatment and the lack of regulations in this area has created an environment ripe for fraud, as unscrupulous operators use addicts to enrich themselves through insurance payments. It's also caused a proliferation of unregulated sober living homes spreading throughout our neighborhoods. We filed an action a few weeks ago in which the defendants are accused of misleading those people who desperately are looking for help, promoting a non-FDA approved experimental operation where it's naltrexone implant surgery, where they take this naltrexone and implant it in their, you call them victims, in an experimental, untested type of surgery, and they're claiming that surgery will help these addicts or people who are addicted to these opioids to not have the desire to continue to use opioids. There's no evidence for that, but that's their claim. So we brought a case against actually more than one of these companies, and we've also even found and alleged that they use body brokers who are profiting from delivering patients to treatment centers to have these treatments. So we've charged, in this one case against Sober Life USA, we've charged 5 doctors, 4 body brokers, the Sober Life USA owner, and 1 staff member. And this is just one of the many different types of schemes that we've been seeing, in addition to in the addiction treatment realm. We've set up that task force to work on this, and the task force, the acronym for it is SLIP, Sober Living, Investigation, and Prosecution. And so we're going to do more than just prosecute with it, because this involves the need for public awareness very much. And so so we're working with various stakeholders in the community, and we want to vigorously prosecute, but we want people to know what's happening, and we want other people who are thinking about opening up sober living homes so that they can cash in to understand that this might have legal consequences for them. So we were the first office in the U.S., the first DA's office in the U.S. to file a civil prosecution against the 5 largest manufacturers of prescription opioids for deceptive marketing practices related to the use of drugs for chronic pain relief. That case, or this particular case, is an effort to change or reduce the supply of the epidemic by holding the companies responsible for the considerable costs that municipalities are now routinely incurring relating to opioid addiction. Our complaint was filed in 2014. It alleges that the defendants overstated the benefits and minimized the risks associated with opioid use for chronic pain conditions. What were the messages that were so pervasive to doctors and consumers to change the way that we viewed these drugs? One of the most important messages we've alleged in our case might sound familiar to you, as it's been used to promote other products in the past. You might recall that the tobacco executives used this marketing, they used this to market their product. They all swore that tobacco was not addictive. You saw the clip in the beginning of this presentation where they stated that there was less than a 1% chance of addiction. That's patently false. So we know that's not true. This is another of the marketing messages that we've highlighted in our complaint, that the unbranded, so when we say unbranded marketing, so what we found is that there's been a lot of marketing for indicating to doctors and the public that it's okay to use opioids for chronic pain. Well, we know that it's addictive, and of course they've underestimated or understated the addictive qualities of the opioids. And so they've done a lot of marketing that's not branded. In other words, it's not stated that Purdue Pharma, for example, is paying for this advertisement or paying for that marketing or paying for this doctor to make a presentation in the continuing education arena. And, but they know that when they increase the market, just in general, when they increase the market for the use of opioids, it's a big boost to them. And so this, so their marketing includes that it's not addictive, like I just said, but then also that it's better than alternative pain relievers. And when you look into it, there isn't really a lot of evidence to show that it's better for chronic pain relief over time than other over-the-counter pain relievers. Another of the messages that we've alleged to be deceptive in our complaint is that the drugs had abuse deterrent properties to help the doctors feel more comfortable with prescribing them. Those abuse deterrent properties have been greatly exaggerated. How were those messages communicated? One way was via the pharmaceutical sales rep. So the pharmaceutical sales rep they're well-trained, well-paid, and so well known to be attractive and bubbly that references to them have even popped up in our popular culture.
These are some of the hottest girls I've ever seen, and they all work with Tiffany? Yep. There can only be one explanation for this. Ted, is Tiffany a pharmaceutical sales rep?
Yeah, how did you know that?
And you never thought to mention that?
In addition to pharmaceutical sales reps, we've alleged in our complaint and found that a lot of the messaging was done through key opinion leaders. And the key opinion leaders are doctors, tend to be well-known doctors who promote the opioids as a good drug and to be used for chronic pain relief. And they promote these messages, and they appear to be neutral. But what's not known is that they're financially backed by the pharmaceutical companies. So, like I said, much of the advertising is unbranded, and the FDA doesn't regulate or monitor the unbranded drug advertising. And actually, the FDA doesn't really monitor any of the advertising. So, in summary, our prosecution efforts we're trying to target each end of this. We're trying to work against the front end to try to bring the pharmaceutical companies into line with respect to what they're saying and how they're advertising. And I think that we're seeing changes in that already. And we're seeing changes also in the fact that doctors are becoming much less willing to prescribe opioids over time, because this whole myth about they're not addictive is understood to be just that, to be a myth. And we're working strongly against the drug driving and the fraudulent addiction treatment homes, or these sober living homes. So we're pretty active, and we still have our minds open, and we're looking to see what else we can do, how we can make an impact. But this is a horrible crisis. I mean, this is a terrible epidemic, and when we get to the point like where we are, where more people are dying from opioid overdoses than from traffic accidents, this is a big, huge cause of death in our country, and we just need to do something about it. Thank you so much.